Sienna Caldwell had always known she was meant for more. Raised in a household where money was tight and opportunities scarce, she understood from a young age that she'd have to fight for every inch of success. Her mother, a former accountant turned teacher, always stressed the importance of discipline, while her father's endless hustles taught her that survival often depended on outsmarting those around you. By the time Sienna secured her first internship at Wellington and Company, she had already mapped out her trajectory. She would climb the ranks, prove her worth, and never let anyone get in her way. Enter Maya Richardson. From the moment Maya walked into the office, Sienna felt an unsettling shift. Maya had the kind of ease that Sienna had never possessed. She charmed the executives, turned colleagues into allies, and, worst of all, delivered results effortlessly. Maya's very presence seemed to threaten Sienna's hard-earned position. It wasn't just about talent. Maya had connections. She had the kind of presence that made people gravitate toward her. While Sienna spent hours refining reports and double-checking calculations, Maya would casually engage in conversations with top executives, turning lunchtime chats into career-changing opportunities. For years they had danced around each other, maintaining a cold yet professional civility. The tension between them was an unspoken battle, but the announcement of a highly sought-after promotion changed everything. Only one would be chosen, and both women knew it. Sienna's mind spun with possibilities. She had worked tirelessly, sacrificed personal relationships, and bent over backward for this role. There was no way she would let Maya steal what was rightfully hers. As the office buzzed with speculation, Sienna became more aware of how others viewed her rivalry with Maya. Some whispered about Maya's growing influence, while others placed quiet bets on who would take the position. Even Charles, their boss, had started to lean toward Maya, impressed by her ability to command a room with both charm and intelligence. Late nights became the norm. Sienna spent hours refining reports, perfecting presentations, and going through Maya's previous work with a fine-toothed comb, searching for weaknesses. But no matter how hard she worked, it seemed Maya was always one step ahead. Maya had something Sienna lacked: people. Where Sienna saw co-workers as mere obstacles, Maya saw relationships. She had allies, mentors, and subordinates willing to vouch for her, and that was a dangerous advantage. Sienna's frustration grew as she watched Maya effortlessly win over clients, executives, and co-workers. The resentment festered inside her, twisting into something darker. She had to be the one in control. She had to win, and if Maya was standing in her way, then she needed to be removed. She spent more time analyzing Maya's habits, her connections, and her weaknesses. If she wanted the promotion, she needed to find a way to ensure that Maya wasn't even considered. It wasn't enough to do better. She needed Maya to fail. The decision was forming in her mind. If Maya was going to lose, it wouldn't be because she wasn't qualified. It would be because she wasn't trustworthy. And Sienna knew just how to make that happen. That night, as she lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, she envisioned her path to victory. Every detail had to be precise. A single slip-up could expose her, and that wasn't an option. She was ready to play dirty. Sienna had never played fair, but she had never been caught either. The moment she saw Maya's pristine presentation folder sitting unattended on her desk, she knew she had a choice to make. Their boss, Charles Henderson, had emphasized that this promotion was about more than just numbers. It was about who could lead and execute with precision. Maya was a natural leader, but Sienna had the edge when it came to strategy. The problem was, Charles didn't see it that way. Not yet. Sienna ran her fingers over the folder. Maya was out to lunch, leaving her entire pitch exposed. Sienna's pulse quickened. If Maya's presentation contained even the slightest inconsistency, it could be enough to tip the scales in Sienna's favor. She hesitated only a moment before making the decision. With careful precision, she altered key figures, ensuring they would raise suspicion but not outright fail. She didn't need Maya to crash and burn, just enough doubt to make her look unreliable. When Maya returned, unaware of the sabotage, Sienna smiled at her, a silent, satisfied smirk. The next morning, as Maya confidently delivered her pitch, Charles's expression darkened. The numbers didn't add up. "Maya, these figures seem off." Maya frowned. "That's impossible, sir. I triple-checked everything." "Well, according to these projections, your cost estimates are inconsistent. We can't afford errors like this." A ripple of unease spread through the room. Maya's confidence wavered for the first time. Exactly what Sienna had planned. By the end of the meeting, the decision had been made. The promotion went to Sienna. Maya sat frozen, her expression a mix of confusion and disbelief. Sienna had played her part well, offering a sympathetic smile as if she hadn't just orchestrated her downfall. She had won. But victories built on deception rarely last. As the day ended, Maya sat at her desk, replaying the meeting in her mind. Something didn't add up, and she wasn't the type to let things go. Sienna had underestimated her. Maya wasn't done fighting. Sienna, however, was already celebrating. She had done what needed to be done, and in her mind, the victory was hers. She didn't see the storm that was coming. Maya wasn't going to let this go quietly. As Sienna packed up for the day, she caught a glimpse of Maya still seated at her desk, deep in thought. The fire in her rival's eyes was unmistakable, and for the first time, a tiny flicker of doubt crept into Sienna's mind. She had won this battle, but was she ready for the war? Maya refused to accept defeat. She had spent years building her reputation, and one bad presentation wasn't enough to bring her down. She had worked too hard, sacrificed too much, and earned her place in the company. Something didn't sit right. She knew her numbers had been perfect. Sitting at her desk, Maya exhaled sharply, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. She began retracing her steps, opening old emails, version histories, and backups of her files. Her mind raced as she cross-checked figures, running the calculations over and over again. Nothing should have been wrong, and yet the numbers Charles had questioned during her presentation had not been what she had originally submitted. Discrepancies, small, almost imperceptible, began to stand out. A shifted decimal point, a subtle increase in projected costs, an adjustment in revenue margins. At first glance, they seemed like minor errors, but Maya knew better. Someone had tampered with her files. Her stomach clenched. But who? And why? She leaned back in her chair, scanning the office. The usual hum of productivity filled the air. Employees typing away, phones ringing, printers whirring in the background. But Maya felt like she was being watched. Across the room, Sienna sat at her desk, poised and confident. She had been oddly smug all day, basking in the afterglow of her promotion. Maya narrowed her eyes. Could it be Sienna? Number, that was ridiculous, wasn't it? Maya's suspicion festered. Had Sienna done something? The thought seemed absurd at first, but then again, Sienna was just as ambitious as she was. The office grapevine was already at work. Maya overheard hushed conversations at the water cooler, glances thrown her way as she walked past. People were talking about her failure. But what unsettled her most was how some of her closest colleagues avoided her gaze, as if they knew something she didn't. Determined, Maya scheduled a meeting with Charles. When she brought up the inconsistencies in her numbers, he sighed, rubbing his temple. Maya, I understand you're upset, but mistakes happen, he said, his voice firm but not unkind. Charles, I don't make those kinds of mistakes, she countered, leaning forward. Someone tampered with my files. Charles's expression flickered with skepticism. That's a serious accusation. I know. That's why I want it to look into the file logs. He hesitated. Maya, if I'm wrong, then I'll accept the loss. But if I'm right... Charles exhaled, then nodded. Fine, I'll have them check. Meanwhile, Sienna was on edge. She had celebrated her promotion, but something felt off. Maya wasn't backing down. She should have moved on like everyone else who had lost before, but Maya was digging, and Sienna had left a trail. She spent the next few days nervously monitoring the office, watching Maya's every move. She noticed the way Maya's jaw clenched when she spoke to IT, the way she stayed late at night, poring over data. Sienna started covering her tracks, deleting emails, modifying timestamps where she could, but it was only a matter of time before Maya found something. Then it happened. An email from IT landed in Charles's inbox. Subject: Unusual file modifications. Hi, Charles. We checked the file logs for Maya Richardson's report, as requested. There were multiple edits made outside of her usual working hours. The edits were traced back to another user. The system logs indicate that the changes were made from Sienna Caldwell's workstation. Let us know if you need further details. Maya felt her heart slam against her ribs as Charles called her into his office. The look on his face told her everything she needed to know before he even spoke. You were right, he said, sliding the IT report across the desk. Maya picked up the papers, scanning the lines of evidence. Her breath caught in her throat when she saw Sienna's name attached to the modifications. She had suspected it, but seeing the proof was something else entirely. Maya lifted her gaze, her expression hardening. What happens now? Charles exhaled. I need to handle this carefully, but if this is what it looks like, Sienna could be in serious trouble. A slow, dangerous smile crept onto Maya's lips. Good. Sienna sat at her desk, staring blankly at her monitor, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. Her heart pounded in her chest as she fought to keep her breathing steady. She had been so careful, or at least she thought she had. But now everything was unraveling. The email from IT had been the beginning of the end. Maya was no longer just suspicious. She had proof. Sienna clenched her fists, resisting the urge to slam them against her desk. How had she missed something so obvious? She had been so caught up in ensuring Maya's downfall that she hadn't considered that someone might look into the file logs. And now Charles knew. Across the office, Maya was far from finished. She wasn't content with just knowing the truth. She wanted justice. After her meeting with Charles, she had sat quietly in her office, thinking. A part of her wanted to storm out, confront Sienna in front of everyone, and watch her squirm. But that wasn't enough. That wasn't how you take down a snake like Sienna. No, this had to be handled methodically. If she played this right, Sienna wouldn't just lose her promotion, she'd lose everything. Maya picked up her phone and made a call. James? Yeah, it's me, she said, her voice smooth but firm. I need you to take a look at something for me. Discreetly. James was one of her closest friends in the company, an IT analyst who had always been good at finding things people wanted to keep hidden. I already heard about what happened, he said. You sure you want to go down this road? Maya smirked. Oh, I'm more than sure. By the following day, the tension in the office was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Sienna could feel the stares, judgmental, curious, suspicious. Whispers followed her everywhere she went. Her paranoia grew with every passing hour. She noticed Maya whispering to James. She saw Charles walking past her office more often than usual, his face unreadable. Were they setting her up? Had they already gone to HR? She had to act fast. That afternoon, Sienna walked straight into Charles's office, closing the door behind her before he could even invite her to sit. I need to talk to you. she said, forcing confidence into her voice. Charles didn't look up from his computer. About what? Sienna swallowed hard. She needed a plan, a distraction. I think Maya is making false accusations against me, she said quickly. That got his attention. Charles finally looked at her, his brow furrowed. False accusations? Yes, Sienna nodded. I overheard her talking to James in IT. She's trying to frame me for something. I don't know what yet, but I have a feeling she's manipulating data. Charles leaned back in his chair, regarding her carefully. That's a serious accusation, Sienna. I know. But Maya is desperate, Sienna lied smoothly. She's angry about losing the promotion, and now she's trying to bring me down with her. Charles rubbed his temples. I already had IT look into the files. The modifications came from your workstation, Sienna. Her stomach dropped. But... Charles raised a hand to cut her off. I don't make decisions based on hearsay. I make them based on facts. Sienna's mind spun. This was slipping away from her faster than she could control. She needed another way out. Meanwhile, Maya sat in James's office, her arms crossed as she watched him type furiously at his computer. You're sure you want to see this? He asked, glancing at her. Maya's jaw tightened. Show me everything. Within seconds, James pulled up a security log from the night before Maya's presentation. The system had automatically logged every change made to the file, including the exact timestamps of when Sienna had tampered with it. Maya leaned forward, her hazel eyes darkening as she scanned the log. There it was, Sienna's digital fingerprints all over the evidence. Gotcha, she whispered under her breath. James smirked. What's next? Maya stood, straightening her blouse. Now? She said, voice steady. Now, we bury her. By the time the workday ended, Sienna was one step away from full-blown panic. She sat in her car in the parking garage, gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles turned white. She needed a way out. If Maya had proof, and she was sure now that she did, then her days at Wellington and Company were numbered. Her phone buzzed, new email from Charles Henderson. Her breath hitched as she opened it. Subject, urgent meeting tomorrow. Sienna, please report to my office first thing in the morning. We need to discuss some serious concerns regarding the recent file discrepancies. Charles. Sienna's entire body turned cold. She had one night to figure out how to save herself. Because tomorrow her world might come crashing down. Sienna barely slept that night. The email from Charles had sent her into full-blown panic mode. Every scenario ran through her mind. Would she be fired, humiliated, arrested? She had worked too hard to lose everything over one mistake. But was it just one mistake? Sienna gritted her teeth as she scrolled through old emails on her phone. There had to be a way to spin this, a way to get out of this unscathed. Then a thought hit her. What if she could turn this on Maya? If she could cast just enough doubt on Maya's evidence, she might be able to wiggle free. She quickly typed out a message. To Charles Henderson. Subject, about our meeting tomorrow. Charles, before we speak, I want to bring something to your attention. I have reason to believe that Maya Richardson has been attempting to manipulate evidence against me out of spite. I would like to discuss this further in our meeting. Best, Sienna. She hit send before she could second-guess herself. If she was going down, she wouldn't go alone. The showdown begins. The next morning, Sienna walked into the office with purpose. Her heels clicked against the tile as she strode toward Charles's office, feigning confidence. She passed Maya on the way, and their eyes met. For the first time, Sienna saw it, the look of victory in Maya's hazel eyes. Maya knew, and now so did Charles. Sienna swallowed hard and stepped inside his office. Charles sat behind his desk, hands clasped together, his expression unreadable. Across from him sat Maya, her expression cool and composed. "Have a seat, Sienna," Charles said, his voice firm. Sienna did as she was told, smoothing down her blazer with shaky hands. "I assume you saw my email," she asked, trying to stay ahead of the conversation. Charles nodded. "I did, and I've spoken with Maya as well. She has presented some very compelling evidence that you manipulated company data to sabotage her promotion." Sienna forced a laugh. "Charles, you can't be serious. This is exactly what I was afraid of. Maya is twisting things to make me look guilty." Maya leaned forward, folding her hands neatly in front of her. "I don't have to twist anything, Sienna. The IT logs speak for themselves." Sienna's jaw clenched. "And how do I know you didn't tamper with those logs?" Charles sighed. "We already checked. The logs are secure. There is no evidence of tampering, except for the alterations made to Maya's files from your workstation." Sienna's stomach dropped. She was cornered. Desperation sets in. Her mind raced. This wasn't how this was supposed to go. She was Sienna Caldwell, smart, ruthless, always in control. She had to think fast. "Okay," she said, forcing a deep breath. "Maybe I did open her files, but it wasn't sabotage. I was just checking her work, making sure everything was correct." Maya let out a scoff. "Nice try." "Sienna," Charles said, his voice heavy with disappointment. "You didn't just check her work, you changed it. You altered key financial figures in a way that would make her look incompetent." Sienna opened her mouth, ready to argue, but nothing came out, because he was right, and there was no way out. The verdict. Charles exhaled sharply and leaned back in his chair. "Sienna, I have no choice but to escalate this to HR. The company has a zero-tolerance policy for unethical behavior, and what you did—" He shook his head. "Frankly, I'm shocked. I expected more from you." Sienna felt sick. This was it, the moment she had feared most. She looked at Maya, who sat calmly, her lips pressed together in satisfaction. This was her victory. Sienna swallowed the lump in her throat. "So, what happens now?" Charles's face was grim. "HR will conduct a formal review. In the meantime, you're being placed on administrative leave, effective immediately." Sienna's heart stopped. Leave? They were kicking her out? "But—" Charles raised a hand. "This is not up for discussion. Gather your things." Sienna sat there for a moment, stunned. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. This wasn't supposed to be her downfall. Maya's final move. Maya stood, smoothing her blouse, as Sienna remained frozen in her chair. She leaned down just enough for Sienna to hear her whisper. "You thought you could destroy me," she murmured, "but you underestimated me." Sienna's hands tightened into fists. She wanted to scream, fight back, do something, but she had nothing left. Maya straightened and turned to Charles. "Thank you for handling this fairly." Charles nodded. "We'll be in touch soon, Maya." Sienna barely heard the rest. The world around her blurred. She had lost, and Maya had won. Sienna walked through the office with her head held high, but inside she was falling apart. Administrative leave. It felt like a death sentence. Every step she took back to her desk felt heavier than the last. This couldn't be happening. Colleagues stole glances as she passed, some whispering behind their hands, others quickly looking away as if they weren't watching the slow-motion destruction of her career. She could feel the heat of their stares, their judgment pressing against her like an invisible force. Maya was watching too. She stood by her desk, arms crossed, her expression unreadable. But Sienna knew that look. Victory. Sienna clenched her jaw as she reached her desk. She wanted to lash out, to scream that this wasn't over, but what could she say? The evidence was undeniable. Her fingers trembled as she opened her drawers, gathering her personal items. A framed photo of herself at a networking event, confident, poised, untouchable. How had she fallen this far? One by one, she placed everything in a small box. Her career wasn't supposed to end like this. A shadow loomed over her desk. She looked up to see Marcus, one of the senior analysts. He hesitated before speaking. "Sienna, I don't know what happened, but..." He sighed. "You were good at what you did." The words stung. Not, "You didn't deserve this." Not, "This is unfair." Just, "You were good." She forced a tight smile. "Thanks, Marcus." Maya, still standing nearby, tilted her head slightly, observing her with quiet satisfaction. Sienna's grip tightened around the box. "This isn't over." As she turned to leave, a few co-workers avoided eye contact, pretending to be busy at their desks. Others, like Denise from accounting, gave her an awkward nod but said nothing. The silence was worse than if they had outright celebrated her departure. The weight of it all pressed down on her as she walked toward the elevator. Each step echoed in her ears, as if the office itself was saying goodbye to her career. When the elevator doors closed, sealing her inside, she finally let out a shaky breath. For the first time, she felt defeated. As soon as Sienna was gone, Maya exhaled deeply and returned to her desk. The moment should have felt satisfying, but instead, an odd unease settled in her stomach. She had spent so much time fighting for her reputation, making sure Sienna got what she deserved, but now that it was over, she felt empty. Her phone buzzed. New email from Charles Henderson. Subject: Let's discuss next steps. Maya, now that the issue with Sienna has been handled, I'd like to speak with you about potential future opportunities within the company. Let's meet tomorrow morning. Charles. Maya stared at the screen. A promotion? So soon? She had worked hard for this, earned it. But was this really about her talent? Or was it just Charles trying to clean up the mess left behind? She closed her laptop and leaned back in her chair, letting her mind wander. Was she truly ready for this? Outside, Sienna sat in her car, gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles turned white. Her career was hanging by a thread. HR would do their review, and she knew what would come next. A polite meeting, a termination letter, and a discreet exit from the company. That wasn't going to happen. Maya thought she had won. Sienna wasn't done yet. She took out her phone and scrolled through her contacts. She needed leverage. She needed a way to turn this around before HR made their final decision. A name caught her eye. She hesitated for only a second before hitting dial. After 3 rings, a familiar voice answered. "Sienna, it's been a while." She inhaled sharply. "I need a favor." A pause, then, "Tell me what you need." Sienna smirked. The game wasn't over yet. Sienna leaned back in her car seat, her pulse still hammering in her ears. She needed a plan. She had called an old contact, someone who owed her a favor. If she was going down, she wasn't going alone. She wasn't about to let Maya walk away with everything while she was left with nothing. Not after all the work she put in. As she tapped her fingers anxiously on the steering wheel, her phone vibrated. She glanced at the screen. "Unknown number," she answered, forcing a calm tone. "Talk to me." "I found something," the voice on the other end said. "Meet me in an hour." A slow smile spread across her lips. This wasn't over. Not yet. The next morning, Maya entered Charles's office, her shoulders squared, her confidence back in full force. If she was being considered for Sienna's position, she needed to make sure she controlled the conversation. She had fought too hard for her reputation to let anyone dictate her next move. Charles gestured for her to sit, Maya, I want to thank you for handling this situation with professionalism. She nodded. I only did what was necessary. Integrity is important in this business. His lips curled into something resembling approval. That's exactly why I want you to step into a larger role here. Maya tried to hide her surprise. You're offering me Sienna's position? He leaned forward. Not just yet. We have to wait for HR to finalize everything, but between you and me, you're the strongest candidate. Maya's stomach twisted. This was what she wanted, but why did she feel like something wasn't right? Take the day to think about it, Charles continued. Let me know if you're ready to step up. Maya nodded, forcing a smile. I appreciate the opportunity. But as she left his office, an unsettling feeling trailed behind her. This wasn't just about promoting her. This was about damage control, and she wasn't sure she wanted to be part of the cleanup. An hour later, Sienna parked her car outside a quiet cafe. She scanned the area before stepping inside. A man sat in the corner, hood pulled over his head, stirring a cup of coffee. She slid into the seat across from him. What do you have for me? He pulled out a tablet and placed it in front of her. I found some inconsistencies in the system logs. Her heart raced. What kind of inconsistencies? He turned the screen toward her. Someone else accessed those reports before you did. Sienna's breath hitched. You're telling me? He nodded. It means the files were altered before you ever touched them. A slow, calculating smirk spread across her lips. This changes everything. Sienna's mind raced as she scrolled through the data on the tablet, absorbing every detail. If what she was seeing was true, then someone had tampered with Maya's reports before she even got involved. This wasn't just about sabotage, it was a setup. She lifted her gaze to the hooded man. Who else knows about this? No one, he replied. Yet. Sienna exhaled, tapping her manicured nails against the table. She had a choice. She could use this information to clear her name, exposing the real culprit, or she could twist it into something that worked in her favor. A slow, wicked smirk curled at her lips. Revenge was so much sweeter when served with precision. This stays between us, she said, locking eyes with him. For now. He hesitated, then nodded. What's your play? Sienna closed the tablet and leaned in. I need you to leak this, but only to the right people. No paper trails leading back to me. I want Maya to feel this coming, but not see me behind it. The man nodded. I can make that happen. Sienna sat back, satisfaction humming through her veins. Let the games begin. At the office, Maya felt an unease she couldn't shake. Something was off. It wasn't just the promotion dangling in front of her like a consolation prize. It was the way people looked at her. She noticed it at the coffee station first, hushed whispers as she walked by, lingering glances filled with curiosity and suspicion. By the time she got to her desk, her inbox was flooded with messages, all linking to the same anonymous reports circulating among employees. The allegations were damning. The report claimed that Maya had been manipulating financial data for months, strategically altering figures to ensure her own rise, while framing Sienna for the mistakes. It was all there. Timestamps, transaction logs, subtle but carefully planted distortions. Maya's stomach dropped. This was impossible. She had done nothing wrong. Sienna must have found something to twist against her. Her fingers trembled as she picked up her phone and dialed Charles's number. Charles, we have a problem, she said, barely keeping the panic from her voice. I know, he responded grimly. Come to my office, now. Maya swallowed hard. She wasn't just fighting for a promotion anymore. She was fighting for survival. Sienna leaned back in her chair, watching the chaos unfold from a distance. The moment the anonymous report hit the office, she knew Maya would be scrambling. She had crafted this plan perfectly. Maya thought she had won, thought she had stripped Sienna of her power and left her humiliated. But Karma had other plans. Sienna smirked as she refreshed her email. All she had to do now was wait. Maya sat across from Charles, her hands clenched into tight fists in her lap. She had faced challenges before, but this was different. Charles's face was unreadable as he slid a printed copy of the anonymous report across his desk. "You've seen this?" Maya nodded. "It's a lie, Charles. Someone's framing me." He leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. "That's exactly what Sienna said when you exposed her." Her heart pounded. She wasn't Sienna. She hadn't doctored files or sabotaged anyone, but now everyone thought she had. Maya forced herself to stay calm. "You've worked with me for years. You know my integrity." "I do," Charles admitted, "but the board is concerned. HR has already begun an internal audit." Maya swallowed the lump in her throat. This was worse than she thought. Charles exhaled heavily. "If you have anything to prove your innocence, now's the time to bring it forward." She needed to find out how deep this went, and more importantly, who was really behind it. Sienna refreshed her inbox again, and there it was, an email from an anonymous account, forwarding new evidence that had somehow made its way to the board. She smirked. Perfect. The beauty of it all? She had crafted just enough half-truths to make the accusations against Maya seem real, but without anything that could be directly tied back to her. Now, Maya was on the defensive, exactly where she needed her to be. Sienna stood from her desk, smoothing down her blazer. Time to start repairing her reputation. She walked out of her office, offering polite smiles as she passed by colleagues who had barely looked at her a few days ago. Perception was everything. If Maya fell, then all the whispers about Sienna would fade into the background, and once that happened, she would reclaim everything that had been taken from her. But karma wasn't done yet. Maya's last shot. Maya paced in her office, her mind racing. If she had learned one thing from this company, it was that whoever controlled the narrative won the war. If Sienna was behind this, she had to find proof, real proof. Her phone buzzed, James from IT. Maya answered immediately. "Tell me you have something." "You're going to want to see this," James said. "Meet me in conference room 3 in 10 minutes. Maya grabbed her notebook and stormed out of her office. If she was going down, she wouldn't be going alone. Maya stood in the dimly lit conference room, her hands gripping the edge of the table as James rotated his laptop toward her. "You were right," he said, his tone grim. "Sienna's fingerprints are all over this." Maya's heart pounded as she stared at the screen. It was all there. Time-stamped access logs, unauthorized file changes, and even traces of a deleted email thread where Sienna had coordinated the framing of Maya's reports. James smirked. She thought she was covering her tracks, but she was sloppy. Maya inhaled sharply. This was it, the proof she needed. Her entire career had been hanging by a thread. Now she was about to cut Sienna's down completely. "I need you to send this to HR," she said, voice steady. "And double C Charles." James clicked send. Maya straightened her posture. Now it was Sienna's turn to lose everything. Sienna was basking in her victory, sipping an overpriced latte in her office, when her phone buzzed. New email, urgent meeting request. Her stomach twisted. She clicked it open. "Sienna, we need to meet immediately regarding new findings in the internal investigation. Please report to my office." "Charles." Sienna's hands went cold. "New findings?" For the first time since this started, panic gripped her. When she arrived at Charles's office, the atmosphere was different. He wasn't alone. HR was there, along with Maya, who sat with an infuriatingly calm expression. Charles wasted no time. "Sienna, we've uncovered irrefutable proof that you falsified evidence against Maya, intentionally altered company records, and attempted to manipulate an internal investigation." Sienna's breath hitched. "How?" She turned to Maya, fury burning in her veins. Maya just smiled. Charles continued, "Effective immediately, your employment is terminated. Security will escort you out." Sienna's world spun. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. She opened her mouth to argue, to fight back, to scramble for a way out, but nothing came. She was finished. As security led her away, the whispers followed, just like they had for Maya. Karma had come full circle. Maya watched as Sienna was escorted out of the building, a satisfying sense of justice washing over her. But this wasn't just about revenge. This was about setting things right. As she walked back to her office, her phone buzzed again. Another email from Charles. "Maya, let's finalize your promotion." She smiled. Maya had fought for everything she had. And now, she had won. The right way.